Hey there, friend. Richie G's on the move again. Taking steps to clear the mind, leaving worries far behind, where every path feels like home, and you never walk alone. It's a welcome, open space, lit by kindness, filled with grace. Yeah, everybody get to know Jesus' name. Everybody gets to know Jesus' name.
Have you ever found yourself navigating a relationship? Maybe it's, a workplace dynamic or a local community group where you feel like you're constantly walking through a thick, disorienting fog.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think everyone has been there at some point.
Right. You get dragged into this endless drama. You feel kind of cornered by someone whose behavior borders on bullying. And you're just trapped in this cycle of second-guessing yourself.
It's exhausting.
It really is. You're constantly wondering, like, am I the problem here? Are they just having a hard time? And more importantly, at what point is it actually mathematically okay to protect yourself and walk away without carrying a mountain of guilt?
Well, it is an incredibly draining place to be. And that psychological fog, it's not an accident. I mean, it's actually a feature of toxic dynamics.
Wait, really? A feature?
Yeah, absolutely. It thrives on ambiguity. As long as you don't know exactly where the boundaries are or what the actual rules of engagement are, you remain off balance. And that makes you much easier to manipulate.
Which brings us perfectly to our mission for today's deep dive. We are exploring a source document called the Identification and Response Model.
It's a fascinating read.
It is. It provides this surprisingly clinical, heavily structured approach to navigating those exact harmful dynamics. Now, I should note for you right up front that this document relies heavily on biblical scripture and ancient Christian texts.
Right, but we're looking at the psychology of it.
Exactly. Our goal today is not to preach, or to endorse a specific theology. We're looking partially at how this ancient framework attempts to solve very modern, highly complex psychological problems.
It promises a tactical map right out of that relational fog. And what's immediately striking about this model is how it removes the emotional volatility from the equation.
Because emotions run so high in these situations.
Oh, totally. Your fight or flight response is constantly triggered. But this framework leans on these ancient texts to provide a very objective, almost mechanical way of auditing these relationships.
Yeah, it treats the problem less like a personal failure and more like a structural breach in a community.
Right.
And I think anyone trying to survive a toxic office or a fraught community dynamic will appreciate that permission to step back and look at it tactically.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because before you can formulate a response, you have to accurately identify the mechanics of the problem.
You have to know what you're dealing with.
Exactly. The sources don't just offer some vague bumper sticker instruction to avoid bad people. They present a highly precise taxonomy of disruptive behavior.
They do. The model actually describes this as a spiritual DNA test. It uses specific Greek terms from Scripture to categorize 4 very distinct profiles.
Profiles of people who have stepped out of rank, as the text says.
Yes, it gives you a diagnostic tool to understand exactly what kind of disruption you're facing.
Looking at these 4 profiles, it seems like the text divides the behaviors based on intent. Like there's a clear distinction between accidental chaos and calculated malice.
That's a great way to put it. So let's start with the less malicious end of the spectrum. Who are we dealing with first?
The first profile is the ataktos. That translates to the disorderly, drawn from 2 Thessalonians 3. And the crucial psychological element here is that these individuals aren't necessarily villains plotting your downfall.
Oh, okay. So what are they doing?
They're described as busybodies. I mean, they basically just lack personal boundaries.
So they're essentially an energy drain. Like, they're the people who constantly disrupt the rhythm of the group, not because they want to destroy it, but because they simply can't manage their own anxieties.
Precisely. They can't stay in their lane. They create chaos because they require constant attention or intervention.
Which completely derails everyone else trying to do the actual work.
Exactly. But the motivation changes drastically with the second profile. This is the hereticos, or the factious.
Factious, okay.
It comes from Titus 3.0. And while it's the root of our modern word heretic in this behavioral context, it refers to an architect of division.
Wow, an architect of division. That sounds like someone who actively weaponizes social dynamics.
Yes, that's exactly what it is. The hereticos manufactures factions to consolidate power. They are completely obsessed with the pecking order.
Right, because we're social creatures. We're naturally wired to seek status and security within a group.
And the factious person exploits that human wiring. They create an in-group and an out-group, specifically so they can position themselves as the gatekeeper.
You see that everywhere. I mean, from corporate reorganizations to, like, neighborhood associations.
Yeah.
They manufacture a crisis because it makes them indispensable.
Right. Then, according to the text, we have a third profile that uses a completely different psychological lever.
Which is?
The pseudo-brother, found in 1 Corinthians 5. This one is fascinating because their primary tool is camouflage.
Camouflage. Like pretending to be something they're not.
Exactly. They use the label of a believer, or in a secular context, a fellow community member, a teammate, a supposed ally, as a cloak.
Oh, that's dangerous.
It is, because beneath that shared identity, they persistently practice abusive speech, greed, or manipulation.
So they're exploiting our cognitive bias to trust the in-group. Like if someone wears the same uniform or uses the right buzzwords, our defenses naturally drop.
We assume they share our values.
Which makes the betrayal that much more insidious. And I guess that leads to the fourth profile, which the text treats as the absolute most dangerous.
Yes, the leucanthropos, or the wolf from Acts 20.
The wolf. Okay, what makes them the worst?
The danger of the wolf lies in their charm. They're explicitly identified by their smooth talk and flattery.
So they don't look like a threat at all.
Not even a little bit. They look like your biggest supporter right up until the moment they get inside the community's defenses and begin to scatter the flock for their own predatory game.
I have to pause and play devil's advocate here for a second. Looking at this taxonomy labeling people as chaotic busybodies, factious controllers, pseudo-allies, or outright wolves, doesn't this framework run the risk of, I don't know, aggressively judging people's inner character?
It sounds a bit harsh, eh?
Yeah, it sounds like we're walking around stamping villain on people's foreheads, which feels incredibly presumptuous.
What's fascinating here is that the source material explicitly anticipates that exact concern. It actually warns against it.
Oh, really? How so?
This framework is not about sitting in judgment of someone's eternal soul, or pretending you understand their childhood trauma or like their internal motivations. You don't have the capacity to judge a soul.
Right.
This is entirely about the objective observation of behavior over time.
Okay, so it's about the output, not the origin.
Exactly. The text talks about observing their fruit and their rank relative to the established standard. You're identifying the tangible, observable results of their presence in your life.
That makes a lot of sense.
It's the fundamental difference between condemning someone internally by saying you are fundamentally evil versus stating an objective boundary. Your documented actions are persistently disrupting the safety of this environment.
That distinction is so critical because it removes the exhausting burden of having to psychoanalyze the toxic person.
You don't have to be their therapist.
Right. You don't have to figure out why they're doing it to know that the behavior is unacceptable. So spotting these behaviors is step one.
Step one, yes.
But recognizing a wolf or a factious person doesn't automatically stop them from wreaking havoc. At what point does this model say it's mathematically time to cut the cord?
Because culturally, we're often pressured to just keep turning the other cheek indefinitely.
Exactly. When do we stop doing that?
That brings us to the procedural triggers. And the model emphasizes that the texts it draws from are adamant about the concept of due diligence.
Due diligence, meaning you can't just act on a whim.
Right. You don't just silently cut someone off or ghost them based on a bad first impression. The trigger for actual separation is persistence over time, but only after absolute clarity has been established.
The model points to a very specific numeric trigger in Titus 3.1 for dealing with the divisive person. It says to reject them after a first and second warning. That level of specificity is striking.
It creates what the model calls a zero fog opportunity.
A zero fog opportunity. I like that.
Yeah, when you give a clear first warning and then a documented second warning, you're completely removing ambiguity from the relationship. You're telling them exactly what behavior is damaging the group.
You know, it's exactly the mechanism behind putting an employee on a performance improvement plan in a corporate setting.
Oh, that's a perfect modern parallel.
Yeah, you don't just fire someone out of nowhere because you're frustrated. You sit them down, you outline the expectations in writing, and you ensure they understand the consequences.
And by doing that, you put the agency entirely back in their hands. If they fail after that, they are choosing to fail.
Exactly.
And the model expands on this procedure with a concept from Matthew 18, which introduces the widening circle.
The widening circle. This is where you don't just keep the conflict isolated, right?
Correct. The text suggests starting with a private one-on-one conversation. But if they refuse to course correct, you systematically widen the circle of accountability.
So you bring in a small trusted group.
Yes. And if they still refuse, it goes to the entire community. The psychology behind this is brilliant because it dismantles the toxic person's ability to control the narrative.
Because a factious person thrives in isolation.
Yeah.
Where it's just your word against theirs.
Exactly. By widening the circle, you expose the behavior to the sunlight of community consensus. And the actual trigger, the moment separation is authorized, occurs when the individual demonstrably prioritizes their own ego over the truth.
They dig their heels in and choose their pecking order position over the relationship.
Yes. And here is a massive paradigm shift the model offers for you. When that trigger is pulled, you are not actively exiling them.
Wait, you're not.
No. The text frames it as them walking out of rank. By refusing to align with the community standards, they have already left.
Oh, wow. So you are merely acknowledging the distance they have actively chosen to create?
That framing completely alters the emotional burden. You're no longer the bad guy kicking someone out. You're simply respecting their autonomous decision to prioritize disruption.
That is so freeing. But let's ground this in reality for a moment. Because formal processes, like giving warnings or widening the circle, they work great when you have a community or a leadership structure that actually has your back.
Which isn't always the case.
Right. What happens when the formal process fails? We live in a world where bullies often manipulate the leadership, or, the HR department is completely ineffective.
That happens all the time.
So how does the individual protect themselves when the system won't do it for them?
That is precisely where the source material introduces the individual response model. When the formal community process breaks down, you still possess a fundamental right and responsibility to protect your own mental and spiritual space.
Okay, so what does the individual do?
The core of this individual response is the strategy of biblical symmetry, which centers on a highly specific Greek military term, stellestai.
Stellestai. Okay, this is where the tactical map gets very practical. What does that actually require us to do?
It roughly translates to withdraw, but it specifically means to make a tactical, controlled retreat. The primary analogy the text uses is furling your sails.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because I think a lot of us misunderstand what a retreat is. Like if we think about a ship in a massive storm, the worst thing you can do is leave your sails up and try to fight the wind.
The wind will just tear the ship apart.
Exactly. When you furl your sails, you roll them up tightly, tie them down, and remove every single inch of surface area that the wind can catch.
That is spot on. Translated to human psychology, a bully or a highly toxic person is like that storm. They generate an immense amount of emotional turbulence.
And if your sails are up?
If your sails are up, meaning if you're actively arguing, defending yourself, or offering a 20-minute impassioned explanation of why they're wrong, you are giving them surface area to catch. You're allowing their hot air to dictate your emotional direction.
But wait, if someone is actively attacking my reputation, spreading rumors, or trying to dominate a meeting, and I just furl my sails and stay silent, isn't that essentially surrendering?
It feels like it, doesn't it?
Yeah. Doesn't the bully win by default if I don't vigorously defend my character?
It is the most deeply ingrained human instinct to defend our reputation. But in this specific framework, silence is not a surrender. It is the establishment of a high-level boundary. It's what the model calls a zero defense posture.
Okay, but how does refusing to defend yourself act as a boundary?
We have to understand the energy dynamics of bullying. A factious person requires a reaction to validate their power.
So bullying is an energy transfer.
Exactly. When you engage, when you argue back, you're implicitly agreeing that their pecking order is legitimate. You're validating their authority to question you by stepping onto their battlefield.
I never thought of it that way.
By utilizing Stelestai, by tactically withdrawing and remaining completely silent, you are starving them of their primary resource, your emotional dysregulation.
You're breaking the circuit. It's a profound way of communicating. I am doing important work, and I simply cannot come down to your level of conflict.
You're refusing to throw your pearls, your energy, and your truth to someone who has already proven they only want to trample them. It completely disarms the toxic dynamic.
Because when you furl your sails, their wind just blows right past you. They have nothing to push against.
Nothing at all.
But looking closely at the source text, there seems to be a glaring contradiction that we need to reconcile here.
What's that?
Well, on one hand, we're discussing this silent defense, tactical retreat, and having absolutely nothing to do with this disruptive person. But later, the model explicitly references the biblical command in Romans 12, which tells readers to be at peace with all men.
Right, I see where you're going.
If you're supposed to furl your sails and withdraw, how do you balance that with a mandate to be at peace with everyone?
That tension is one of the hardest things to navigate in practice. But the model resolves this apparent contradiction by drawing a very sharp, uncompromising distinction between two completely different concepts: civil peace and relational peace.
Break the difference down for us, because I think society constantly conflates the two, telling us that if we are polite, we owe people our friendship.
That happens so often. Civil peace is how you fulfill that broad command in Romans 12. It simply means you maintain basic human decency.
Okay, so what does that look like?
You're the person who offers a polite civil greeting when you pass them in the hallway. You do not return evil for evil. If they hurl an insult, you don't retaliate. You are at peace because you aren't the one throwing stones or escalating the conflict.
So civil peace is essentially basic hallway etiquette. You aren't slashing their tires or bad-mouthing them at the water cooler.
Right. But relational peace is something entirely different. Relational peace requires trust, and it is a privilege.
A privilege that they haven't earned.
Exactly. The framework argues that you can fully maintain civil peace while simultaneously denying that person any relational peace. You deny them access to your heart, your vulnerabilities, your plans, and your mission.
The model refers to this as giving them the Gentile treatment, right?
Yes, polite distance, but absolutely zero intimacy. To visualize this, the sources use an incredible analogy.
I love analogies. Let's hear it.
Imagine a National Geographic photographer out in the wild.
Okay, I have the visual.
You can be completely at peace with a massive, dangerous lion as long as you're observing it from the safety of a high, rocky ridge.
Right.
You can admire it from a distance. You're not actively trying to harm it, but you absolutely do not go down into the tall grass to try and pet it.
That is brilliant. You stay out of the tall grass. Because entering the tall grass implies a level of intimacy and safety that simply does not exist with a predator.
Exactly.
You don't have to be rude to the lion, but you absolutely do not owe the lion access to your personal space.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of what this document is trying to achieve, staying on that ridge means staying grounded in your principles and your rank.
Which keeps you safe.
Yes. When you maintain that polite distance, you allow what the text calls the peace of God to act as the umpire of your heart.
An umpire calling the balls and strikes, like dictating what is safe and what is out of bounds.
Perfectly said.
And because you're not exhausting all your energy fighting a lion in the mud, your equipment stays clean and your vision stays entirely clear for the actual work you're meant to be doing.
That's the ultimate goal.
This has been a deeply clarifying journey. I mean, we started in the disorienting fog of toxic dynamics, and we have unpacked a real tactical framework for getting out.
We really covered a lot of ground.
We did. We examined the taxonomy of disruption, distinguishing the boundaryless attactos from the power-hungry hereticos, the camouflaged pseudo-brother, and the predatory wolf.
And we established that identifying these profiles is about objectively observing their fruit, not arrogantly judging their souls.
Right. From there, we looked at the procedural triggers for separation, providing that zero fog clarity through warnings, widening the circle of accountability, and realizing that when they refuse to align, they are the ones choosing to walk away.
Which is a huge relief to understand.
It is. And finally, we explored the most practical tool for the individual, the Stelestai. Furling your sails, starving the bully of your emotional energy, and maintaining civil peace from the safety of the ridge.
It's an incredibly empowering framework for establishing boundaries.
So what does this all mean for you, navigating your own complex relationships? It means you aren't required to win the pecking order game. You can actively choose to step off the board.
You really can.
You do not have to fight for a seat at a table where a toxic person is demanding to be the host. You can maintain your civil peace, offer a polite nod, and quietly walk away to invest your energy where it actually matters.
But, and this is a big bet, this leaves us with a final, vital question to ponder.
Oh, I'm ready. What is it?
This entire model focuses heavily on how you manage external threats, right? People you can distance yourself from. But this framework requires us to honestly evaluate ourselves, too.
Oh, that's tough.
It is. If you find yourself constantly having to furl your sails and withdraw because everyone around you seems toxic, you have to ask yourself a hard question.
Which is?
Is it possible that you aren't actually surrounded by wolves? Is it possible that, without realizing it, you have become the atactos, the disorderly one who has stepped out of rank?
Oh, wow. That is a phenomenal question, and a reality check that I think we all probably need from time to time.
It's definitely something to chew on.
Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into the identification and response model. As you go forward this week, guard your peace. Remember that silence can be your strongest boundary, and whatever you do, stay out of the tall grass. Keep learning, and we'll catch you next time.
In the noise of the crowd where the shadows play, there's a pecking order leading hearts astray. A hollow throne built on pride and demand. While we're searching for the rock on which to stand, I see the fog, I see the tangled line, but I'm looking for the fruit of the true vine. And I'm stepping out of the rain today, letting the word be the light and the way. Not in anger, but in quietness and peace, where the striving and the lording finally cease. I find my place on the bedrock so deep, a promise for the soul that he will keep. There's a brother who wanders, a heart gone cold, trading the truth for the power they hold. I've given the warning once and then twice, but I won't pay the toll of a compromise price. I furl my sails, I change my course, to find the peace at the river's source. And I'm stepping out of the rain today, letting the word be the light and the way. Not in anger, but in quietness and peace, where the striving and the lording finally cease. I find my place on the bedrock so deep, a promise for the soul that he will keep. Chase, I'm standing in silence, I'm standing in grace. As far as it depends on me, I'll be kind, but I'm leaving the burden of the bully behind. The path is narrow, The vision is clear, perfect love has cast out every fear. I'm stepping out of the rain today, letting the word be the light and the way. Not in anger, but in quietness and peace, where the striving and the lording finally cease. I find my place on the bedrock so deep, a promise for the soul that heals.